Hi, hello, good morning. Technically it's still morning. So I've been talking for a while now about starting a collection, and I think that the time has come for me to put pen to paper and start conceptualizing this thing. This is going to be a very informal vlog, by the way, if you can't tell already. I'm trying to keep you from going up my nose. Hopefully by the time that I upload this video, I will have already uploaded the video about the professional design process in the fashion industry. I am definitely not going to be following all of those steps as an independent designer because there are some of them that you just can't do as a single person, but I'm going to do my best. So if you watch that video, then you know that the first thing that most brands do is they sort of come up with like a concept. I think for me, because this is my first round of the collection, it's much more important for me to come up with an overall feel for the collection as a whole and not necessarily like a seasonal theme, and come up with house codes, because having that foundation of what your house stands for and what your house is and what you're trying to say with your collection, I think at this point for me is much more important than necessarily coming up with a clever theme or concept. Some of my house codes are probably going to be very obvious to those who have watched this channel for a while. Historical clothing, historicism are very important to me, as is medievalism, pre-Raphaeliteism, all of that historical content is going to be very key and core to the collection as a whole. But I am an artist living in the 21st century, so there is a lot more to me than just that. And I want to take this opportunity to explore some of that. I do think that the one thing that you're really not allowed in the fashion industry is time to explore ideas. You kind of have to like hit the ground running no matter how you're designing, runway, whatever. There's not a ton of like self-reflection time. I have that luxury right now, so I'm gonna take it. As you can see behind me, I'm very well covered in terms of historical fashion. I've got books on just about every period, I would say. Not that you can never have too many books. But I don't know, there's like something that I've been noodling on that I can't quite put words to just yet that I think is going to be very important to my collection. For me, I think that the best way to kind of get that out there and start to explore that is to jump into the stacks in the library. So that's where we're starting this journey. I'm gonna go to the library, I'm just gonna see what draws me in, and we'll go from there. We'll see where that leads me.
Don't get me wrong, I love digital culture, and I'm so grateful for the information that is freely available at the click of a mouse, but there is something about being in the stacks that is really special. Plus, I mean, the smell. I am very well covered in terms of fashion history in my personal collection, so I went through the more general design section of my library just to see what drew me in. Pre-Raphaelites, because, of course. But I also found myself drawn to mid-century design ideas, architecture, photography, and furniture design specifically. My architectural interests also included Le Corbusier, who I thought I got my fill of in design school, but apparently not. I flipped through the books, just trying to distill what it was about them that drew me in. For some, it was pretty obvious. I mean, if you've been around this channel for a while, you know I am intensely interested in the medieval and early modern period, and likewise the Victorian obsession with these periods. I honestly think the Venn diagram of people watching my channel and people who've never heard of the Pre-Raphaelites is just two circles. But just in case, the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood was a group of artists in the late 19th century who are now mainly remembered for their artistic preoccupation with the medieval and early modern eras. They greatly inspired the later arts and crafts movement, and in reality, they're actually much more fascinating than a bunch of people with medieval fantasy syndrome. The Brotherhood formed to combat the Industrial Revolution. The Pre-Raphaelites turned to medieval and Renaissance art for a more humanist inspiration, and they really immersed themselves in that lifestyle. I mean, in an age with things like ChatGPT, where we're constantly turning to AI, I can empathize with them. Don't get me wrong, I'm very interested in what the Pre-Raphaelites were doing visually and literally, but I think I'm more interested in the way they were working, kind of immersing themselves in their ideals. But when I began going through Le Corbusier, I realized it's actually a much deeper idea I'm trying to unpack. Le Corbusier is a Swiss-French architect, very active through the first half of the 20th century, who is essentially known for his brutalist strip-down of architecture, where he got rid of all the ornamentation of the Art Nouveau and presented architecture that was bare and purely functional. Except it wasn't. Le Corbusier had a strict set of principles that enabled him to design with purpose. Standardization and unity, including standard materials, is actually a great way for me to lay out some house codes and choose my own consistent set of materials. And what is a brand without its standard slopers, or the pattern blocks they base their designs upon? As I find is usually the case, I'm much more interested in the way Le Corbusier worked than in using his style as visual inspiration. This was a book with quotes by mid-century furniture designer Eames, put alongside photographs. I love how he points out that design doesn't start and end with your sketches. Every part of your day is a design decision, and everything becomes a part of your process.
This has been a lot of fun to explore all of this latent inspiration, but I think that what I'm really doing here, rather than just finding visual inspiration, I mean, there's a ton of visual inspiration here, who are we kidding? But I think that probably the main takeaway for me has been just coming to grips with the fact that I am a 21st century person and that I will only ever experience the pre-Raphaelite period or the Edwardian or the Victorian or the medieval or the early modern period as a person who knows about Le Corbusier or Eames or, mid-century design and all of this. And so everything that I do is going to come through that lens. And all of those things are pretty important to me. I mean, I live in a place where mid-century design is very prominent and very important. So all of that is going to kind of make up the codes of my collection in some way. I don't have any design boards right now. I'm not the biggest fan of foam, but I do have a big empty wall. And so I'm just going to print some of these things out and get them put up on the wall. I've been at this a few days now, and the main theme I'm working through is tension. Design needs tension to be interesting, so there's nothing wrong with that. And for me, that is representing itself in moments of light and dark, which goes back to the Gothic project I did. These obviously man-made structures, but you can see the natural elements present, all that textural stone in there. I think playing with opacity will also be important. But most of all, it's these mixed historical moments, things that are clearly very modern next to things that are clearly historic, and moments where you can see the inspiration behind the historicism coming through. I've also started pinning up a few fabrics that I have that I think will go well with this collection. The blue organza from the Gothic project, this lovely organic cotton voile, but I'm going to try not to source any new virgin materials other than what I already have, because most of what I have is dead stock, including all of these fabrics that are up on the board right now. I've been collecting ruined bed sheets for quite some time. I love all the nostalgic prints and colors, and what is a bed sheet if not yardage of fabric? And I'm going to work around the rips and tears, maybe dye some of this, which could be tricky because there is a lot of polyester in there, something called percale, I don't know, and do some other surface treatments to help the fabric along. Because bed sheets, although they are yardage of fabric, can definitely look like bed sheets. But really though, I'm trying to have this collection have the lowest environmental impact possible. I'm too small to demand carbon disclosure from textile mills, and even if I could, I think curbing the signal for virgin materials is probably better than buying virgin materials with a reduced footprint. So stained and holy bed sheets it is. So I've got the beginnings of my conceptual journey here. This will continue to develop as I design into it. I've got a good start on sourcing material. I started working through some specific techniques, smocking, obviously, a few others, which will be included in future videos. What I need to do is to get some color up here. All right, kids, buckle up because you're going on a wild trip through my mind. I am of two minds when it comes to color, and I think that it's kind of indicative to how I view the world, my overall, conflict with who I am as a designer. So on one hand, I love the desert and the neutrals that inherently go along with that. And on the other hand, I'm an 80s, 90s kid, and there's something about the sort of kitschy, bright, optimistic world that is that really inspires me still to this day. I also grew up on these mid-century Disney books with their lovely colors and the illustration techniques. By the way, I'm sure a lot of you can probably smell this image right now in your minds. I love the dégradé, almost pointillized effect here in juxtaposition to some of the stronger line work. I think it's just a really cool look. Side note, at some point I'd love to conceptually explore the use of medievalism in children's media. I'm running completely on instinct here, but I think this is where my color story lies, and I really want to play around with creating moments like this using different mark-making techniques. There's no way I'm going to be custom lab dipping any colors with any textile mills. I'll absolutely do some of my own dyeing, but mostly I'll be using found fabrics. I'll still pick out some of these specific colors to give me an overall color story and help me make decisions in the design process. So to recap, basically my color story is whatever the fluff I want. The Disney books led me to the work of Eyvind Earle, an illustrator who did the original concept art for Disney's Sleeping Beauty, which is probably the most gorgeously stylized animated film of all time, IMO. And Eyvind was super inspired by Très riche Heures de jeune Duc de Berry, a richly colored illuminated manuscript. I absolutely love the way both Eyvind and the manuscript use both muted, more neutral colors along deep, saturated pigments like lapis lazuli. I'm not a brilliant colorist, but I want to try out this accentuated neutral color palette. My color palette will be mostly white, black, midnight blue, and various shades of tan, but I worked back and forth with the manuscript, the books, and some images of the desert around my house to choose some cool colors I think I'll be able to dye with. Next, it's on to silhouette development. Plenty of that will come directly from portraits and photographs, but I'm also very privileged to have a good-sized archive of extant pre-World War II garments, some of which I've come across myself, and some of which I've been entrusted with by friends and family. I love designing from real clothing, but as a rule, anything pre-World War II I treat as though it's too delicate to go on a dress form. So I carefully laid out all of these garments and photographed them in detail so that I can use them as inspiration. Garments I've reconstructed myself are another story. I used these pieces to drape onto a form and come up with ideas for silhouettes and details. These Dorothea bodies will be an integral part of my collection, so look out for many explorations of that idea in the future. You'll get a lot more of this kind of development in the videos for the individual garments I'll make in the future. Okay, I'm by no means done researching and incubating the collection, but I'm off to a good start. I think it's time that we actually start making some clothes now. The good news is, because it has taken me so long to make this video, I already have a couple of garments done, so those videos will be along shortly. If you've enjoyed this practical voyage through independent collection development, I always appreciate a thumbs up. And hit subscribe if you're ready to see some sewing already. Bye!